Welcome back to my second video on cycle touring costs. If you want to see the first one, that was comparing Brittany cycle touring for a week with North Devon cycle touring in winter in B&Bs. So it's camping versus B&Bs. And I will put that video here. I find these kinds of videos really helpful because it's just interesting to see what other people spend when they are cycle touring or doing other kinds of adventures. In this video, I'm going to talk about the cycle touring trip I took this year, last month in June, in Normandy. And Normandy is a really cool place for cycle touring. It's a lot flatter than Brittany, or rather, should I say, it's less hilly than Brittany. There's still a EuroVelo that travels through the whole thing pretty much coastally a lot of the time. And it's just really, really beautiful landscape. It's also the site of the D-Day beaches, the Normandy beaches, so that is a huge draw for cycle tourists and for tourists in general. If you haven't seen the video where I'm actually cycle touring in Normandy, then you can check that out here and maybe come back to this one unless you want to watch the cost side of it before you watch the actual cycle tour itself. But it might make a bit more sense if you watch the cycle tour itself first. Don't worry, I'll wait. Okay, so let's jump in with the ferry. So normally when I'm going cycle touring in France, I go cycle touring in Brittany, and that is because I live not too far from Plymouth in the southwest of the UK, and Plymouth has a ferry port that goes to Roscoff in northwest France in Brittany. Because there's only one ferry port there, it means like I would always have to do a loop, which I like, and Brittany is very lovely. But this year I wanted to go to Normandy and I wanted to do a linear cycle tour. So we drove to Portsmouth and got the ferry to St Malo.
We are on the Portsmouth to St Malo ferry.
And then we cycled east along the French coast to Caen and returned to Portsmouth on the ferry from Caen. And traditionally that ferry route is a lot cheaper than the ferry route from Plymouth to Roscoff, but I sort of made an error with dates, and so I had to rebook the ferry in reverse. So originally I'd booked from Portsmouth to Caen, cycled to St Malo to Portsmouth, but it didn't really work out that way, so I had to reverse the routes, which cost about £40 in rebooking fee. Because of the timings of those ferries, I then had to take an overnight ferry from Portsmouth to St Malo, which added a ton more cost because you pretty much have to pay for a cabin on that route, and it's completely overnight, so it's definitely good to get proper sleep before you basically turn up in France at 8 AM in the morning and then just cycle off the ferry for a full day of cycling. So you want to sleep well before. As a result of taking an overnight ferry out and a daytime ferry back, that ferry, including the £40 rebooking fee, cost £373. The original ferry was 188, which was a stone cold bargain compared to the Plymouth to Roscoff ferry, but obviously it turned out being £373 anyway, which is quite a lot of money, but that does include a night of accommodation if you think about it, and it meant that we could start cycle touring in France, in St Malo, at 8 in the morning, and that was really fun. And if you watch the video, you'll see how we were first off the ferry. So we spent 8 nights in total on this cycle tour, including the first night on the ferry. So 6 of the nights that we spent in France, we camped. So that means for 5 of those nights, we camped in our actual tent that we took with us. And for 1 of those nights, we stayed in an adorable little hiking cabin that I've stayed in Brittany before, and the campsite's there. And I found a couple in Normandy as well, and we stayed in one of them, and it was wonderful, and I have absolutely no regrets. So the first night camping was €20. The hiking cabin was €31. The third night camping was €27, then 22, then 26, then 19. These prices are all pretty much more expensive than the campsites in Brittany last year and the year before that. I don't know if it's a Normandy thing. I think there's a lot more tourism in Normandy in general, so it wouldn't surprise me if the campsites were a little bit more expensive than they were in Brittany. And obviously if you think about it in relation to staying in a B&B or a hotel or something, then paying 20, 27, 26, €30 even for a night of accommodation for 2 people is still incredibly cheap. But in general, it was ever so slightly, like a few euros here and there, more expensive than Brittany last year. For the final night in France, we didn't stay in a campsite, we stayed in an ibis hotel, and that was because our ferry left really early the next morning. So the ferry itself left at 8 o'clock in the morning, I think, but obviously you have to be there, you have to be checked in an hour before I think the ferry leaves, so that's 7 a.m. and then that's the latest. So maybe it's 45 minutes before actually. Anyway, we had to leave the hotel early, like 6:45 or 7 a.m. And I didn't want to camp that night and then have to pack up the tent and pack up all the bikes and the panniers and everything at 6 in the morning so I could then cycle to the ferry port. So instead we stayed in an Ibis hotel, and that was, you could like look out the window and there was the ferry port right there. So we could cycle straight out and we didn't have to worry about packing up a tent. And the Ibis cost 113 euros, which is a lot, but I have no regrets because again, just rolled out of bed and straight onto the ferry. In total for the Normandy cycle tour, the accommodation costs were £218 for 7 nights. So that includes the Ibis, but it doesn't include the cabin on the ferry because I included that in the £373 for the ferry. So £218 for 7 nights of accommodation, half of which was a hotel for 1 night. So you can see that that's pretty cheap for a week's holiday. When it came to food, we did what we always do, which is just shop at boulangeries and supermarkets, and that's it. We only eat cold food when we're cycle touring because it is so much cheaper, like so much cheaper than eating out. You know, it's usually nice weather cycle touring in France in June, so it's quite nice to just eat picnic food the whole time. And picnic food in France is baguette, that's tabouleh, that's salad, that's avocado, that's celery remoulade, which is so delicious. It's like mustardy celeriac stuff. It's so good. So we just would go shopping in supermarkets, and several times a day would stop at a boulangerie and get some bread, get some pastries, get a little coffee, something like that. So the food costs that I have clawed from my Euro account are like €8.80 here, €6.60 there, €2.75 here, €9 there, €23 there, €34 in Carrefour one day, blah blah blah. You kind of get the point. So all the food costs for that entire 8-day trip was £201, which I think again is pretty good considering that's 2 people. That's 2 people, that's not my half, that's 2 people. The only other real cost I have on here that I found was €24 to go and see the Bayeux tapestry. Totally worth it. Like, you learn about it in school and now I've seen it in real life and it is massive. It is worth every euro. Oh, that's euros as well, it's not pounds. It's worth every euro of that €24 to go and see the Bayeux tapestry. The other cost that I'd forgotten to add on here, but now I've just thought about it, is the JustPark parking space. Again, not sponsored, I just really like JustPark. We drove from our house to the ferry port in Portsmouth, which is like a 3-hour drive. But instead of parking in incredibly expensive ferry car parks, I don't even know if they exist, but parking anywhere else, I booked a JustPark parking space, and that cost for 8 days, I think it was £47. And that was just someone's private driveway that they're renting out via JustPark. It's such a great app. There are other ones as well that are, I'm sure, just as good and do the same kind of function. But I've had so much luck with JustPark finding them in the perfect place. This one was a 7-minute bike ride from Portsmouth ferry port, and it felt really safe. It was just on someone's driveway. They even had a gate and a wall that like closed the driveway, so it felt like the car was really secure. So that was great. So I'm now going to add that in to my total calculation. £839 for 8 days of cycle touring, including 1 very expensive ferry. Oh, that very pains me. It could have been so much cheaper had I thought about it in advance, and anyway, what's done is done. So £839, 2 people, 8 days, lovely cycle tour. If you divide that by 2, obviously that is £419 for my share of that. And I only went cycle touring for 1 week because I had other family commitments either side of that. But if you're going for longer, the cost of the ferry sort of becomes a bit less massive. If you're going cycle touring for 3 weeks, the ferry cost is still going to be the same thing. So there you go, that's how much it cost me to go cycle touring in 2024 in Normandy During D-Day week, I would like to say, we arrived in France on the 6th of June, which is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. So it was really busy in Normandy in general. But basically what you're looking at is £200 in accommodation, because we were camping that whole time except for one night in a hotel, and then £200 for food for the week as well, which, like I say, I think is a pretty reasonable holiday. I hope this was useful. If you have any, I don't know, financials for your cycle tours that you want to share in the comments and let other people know how much this stuff costs, it's really beneficial because a lot of people have never been cycle touring before, but they really want to go and they're not sure how much it's going to cost, or maybe that's a great incentive for more people to go cycle touring in the first place, which I would love to see. It's just a really affordable way of getting around, especially in France, especially if you can find a ferry that isn't incredibly expensive. But cycle touring in France in and of itself is really, really affordable. I hope this was useful and thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.